Hello, this is Mark here at Gary's Guitars in Portsmouth, New Hampshire, and it's time for our little amp series, and today's little amp is the Gretsch Gadabout. So say hello to my little friend. Now this amp will be particularly interesting to you if your name is Mike, because if it is, this amp has your name on it. Instead of saying Mike, M-I-C, they wrote M-I-K-E. However, this is an interesting amp for this series for a couple of reasons. One is, and I'll lead with this, I was listening to an interview with Daniel Lanois, which is something that recording engineers do. You just find everything that all the famous engineers have said on podcasts and you listen to them. And this particular one, he mentions that this is one of his favorite amps. This is like an amp that he's used a lot, and so I was like, wow. And then when I saw one, I said, I should probably get that. Danielle Lanois thinks it's cool. But, it's the kind of amp, and it is cool, by the way. It's a solid state amp. It's not a tube amp. And all this kind of 5-watt fury, 5-watt fever that's around. Everyone's going these little single-ended, Class A tube amps. Is like, oh, that's what, I want. But the low watt solid state amp, especially the vintage low watt solid state amp, has a place in this world, and we're going to talk about it and through talking about this Gretsch Gadabout. So let's get to it. Here it is, the Gretsch Gadabout. I do have to kind of break the fourth wall for a second. The neighbors at the restaurant next door to us, on the weekends they have high school kids working. And these Generation Z kids are unironically listening to Smash Mouth. So if you hear that in the background, it's not me. So here's the Gretsch Gadabout. What makes this amp interesting, other than being made specifically for people named Mike? 2 inputs, a volume control, which is always on 10. It might be a couple watts. Someone wrote somewhere 6 watts, but I don't believe it. It's not that loud an amp. It came with batteries. So here we say battery play, battery charge, off, and AC play. You could also plug it in. Most of them have had the batteries removed. It was a really early portable amp, an attempt at a portable amp. So it had a cover that fit over here. It latched on here, kind of like a film projector cover kind of thing. Possibly Japanese made. And because it is, it's not much to see in here right now, but this is where the batteries used to be. There used to be a lantern battery, what we would call, back in my day, we call them lantern batteries. Big 6-volt flashlight batteries with a multi-cell in one big pack. So maybe someone could come up with a modern way to use a lithium battery to power this amp. But has that Gretsch logo on the knob. That's important. And Asian manufacturing, because just looking inside, and this, which we won't be able to do right now, but looking at the amp inside and how it's built, it looks a lot like its other 60s Japanese made amps. So it has a, let's see, 6-inch Jensen. And what's it sound like, you might ask? I'm glad you asked. It sounds really cool. It has a lot of presence, and presence is a difficult thing to explain to someone because it's just it's just difficult. There's been a lot of different things called presence. So it has a very upfront sound, a very present sound. The kind of sound that we could talk about compression, but the compression isn't that hearable. It's just a brightness, an overall brightness that's kind of cool, but it's not bright like hot, like trebly bright. It's just all there. There is, like I said, very low wattage, but turned all the way up, it doesn't distort. So maybe there's either something wrong with mine, or that this amp was designed not to distort, which a lot of amps were designed not to distort. Distortion was a tremendous byproduct of cheap-made amps, but this one might be an attempt to not do that. So I mentioned that solid state amps like this amp, for example, does not distort when turned up, or does not distort, like it distorts constantly actually, but it doesn't get that raring distortion. Oftentimes when you're talking about low wattage amps, once you get past the 12 o'clock mark on the volume knob, you just get more distortion and compression. You don't get louder. This amp actually turned all the way up, has a really present, cool, there is distortion in the overtones, and that's why I want to talk about this particular solid state amp. But solid state distortion can be cool as well. Especially on an amp like this, solid state distortion tends to favor different intervals in the kind of sound spectrum. So if you read Russell Ham's paper that people like to refer back to, you know, tube lovers like to refer back to, I read it when I was very young because Russell Ham worked for my father. So when I heard that he wrote this, like this big thing on why tubes are better, I was like, I gotta read this. And I met him, and he was an interesting man. However, having said that, the paper says, and he did this analysis, that tubes naturally accentuate harmonics that are in the musical spectrum. The 1, the 3, the 5, I think it was 1, no, I think it was 1, 4, 5, 7. Gotta go back and read the paper. But, you know, and that solid state, when it distorted, or what it would accentuate, is like a sharp 1 and a flat 5. You know, the harmonies weren't so so complementary. Therefore, solid state amplification could lead to harmonics that were non-musical, so to speak. So the end result of that is, of course, he was talking about purity in music, and oftentimes when you're using a small 5-watt amp, you want to have a hellacious sound. And although this one, like I said, doesn't get hellacious turned all the way up like some other made in Japan amps from the 60s, I would say it's a great amp to have. If you find one kicking around, get it. It's not going to be your all day, all the time 5-watt amp, probably. It's got one sound, like I said. Well, it could be your all day 5-watt amp. It has a very unique character to it. So I'm not going to put that limitation on it. So thanks for watching. Once again, watch the other videos in this series. We have a couple other series on YouTube that you can watch. And then you can watch the YouTube lives we do once a week. You can check us on Instagram, Facebook, and all that. And thanks for watching.